And
Thank you, Therese.
you're welcome.
And good evening to everybody. Tonight's presentation is sponsored by the Holistic Health Community and also the Morty and Gloria Wolosoff Foundation. So for any of you who are new to the Holistic Health Community, we're a nonprofit corporation dedicated to providing free holistic health care and education to our local community and beyond. During this COVID time, we have been doing so virtually. Beginning next Monday, we're offering our May Holistic Healthcare Week, where 21 practitioners are offering free sessions. So if you're not on our mailing list, please go on our website, which is holistichealthcommunity.org, and sign up for our mailing list so we can let you know about all of these free offerings, including tonight's wonderful presentation by Janus Welton. Janus is a practicing registered architect, sustainable building consultant, and an educator in the Hudson Valley, New York. She combines sustainability, building biology, healthy building, biomimicry, classical feng shui, and sacred geometry in her holistic design and consulting practice and her educational workshops. She holds a Master of Architecture degree from the University of Colorado in Denver, a Master of Science degree in biomimicry from Arizona State University, and a Bachelor of Fine Arts from Virginia Commonwealth University. Before starting her own studio in New York in 2000, she served as Director of Concept Architecture for Sony Development and Senior Designer for Walt Disney Imagineering in Los Angeles. She lectures widely on sustainability, biomimicry, and conscious design philosophies, including sacred geometry. We at the Holistic Health Community are blessed to have Janus working with us as the designer of our future home. And it's with great pleasure and delight that I introduce her tonight as our speaker, and I turn it over to you, Janus.
Great, thank you. How's the volume for everybody?
Very good.
Good, excellent. Well, good evening to everybody. I'm excited to share with you tonight a journey into sacred geometry, the patterns of number and nature. And while I'm not a full-time sacred geometry researcher, I am an architect who feels very passionately about the value of sacred geometry, and I employ it in my designs. So I really feel its purpose is to express specific energies in architectural form, thereby best supporting building functions and occupants, because this shapes their consciousness and experience in the architectural spaces in both subtle and very powerful ways. So our built environment really is important as it shapes our energetic experiences, because once we get a building, it therefore shapes us. So my intent tonight for this lecture is to introduce you visually to a myriad of basic geometry and numeric patterns, both in nature and in architecture. Now, all these materials and references will be made available to you on the Holistic Health website in the near future, so you can access them and try out some of the drawings on your own. So sit back and relax, and we'll begin. So what do art and architecture, nature, animals, the human body, numbers, shapes, colors, light, form, and all creation have in common? Well, it's through the study of numbers and geometric shapes, cyclical patterns and symbols, where we establish a pattern language that reflects the human psychological realm and gives beauty and truth to all of that we create. So that's right, it creates Geometry and mathematics. That's maybe not our favorite subject in the whole world, but we learn to look at nature and all living things. And as we do so, we see the bigger picture. So with geometry, we express number as perception. And this perception connects us to the one and the many, or as you may have heard, the as above and the so below. So these patterns inform the DNA of all living things and constitute the building blocks of all creation. So the essential universal pattern that we speak of is wholeness. And we find that the whole is present in every little part. So we are each united with the entire world because all that is in the world is also within us. Everything is a part of the whole and embodies the wondrous patterns of creation. So these relationships heighten our human aesthetics, our sense of purpose and symbol. So did you know that the diameter of the moon is just about as equal to the radius of the Earth's core? And the size of the Earth's core is equal to the nodes of an octahedron? The octahedron being the underlying geometry that forms the points on a star tetrahedron inside the Earth, as you can see in this graphic. Also, the distance from the center of the Earth to the center of the moon is equal to the distance from the center of the sun to the nodes of its own octahedron. And the points of the star tetrahedron that it creates are where sunspots are located. So both sunspots and the moon have a full revolution period of 27.3 days, which is a very sacred number. So these universal patterns in the cosmos connects us as humans, as fractals of a larger world, a cosmos that consists of the sun, moon, and the earth, and the skies with its universal patterns, geometries, and nature. So if we look at the entire solar system, we'll see a large asteroid belt at the edge of our system. And interestingly enough, that has the same thickness as the white area of a human eye. So the planet orbits match the eye structure. If the entire belt was lit by the light of the sun, it would look like an eye staring at you in space. So the Earth, with its core and inner core, has the same dimensional relationship as our human eyes. It's fascinating, just fascinating. So geometric patterns are what shape nature. These universal patterns of mathematics symbolize the inner psychological human realm, as well as provide a sacred spiritual structure. Therefore, certain building shapes and forms evoke deep feelings. They evoke powerful realizations, and they can illuminate the human connection in nature while enhancing the energy within the building for us as occupants. So nature's geometry, from the cosmic geometries that we just saw to the simple fruits and vegetable species, the same geometric structure of life and organisms share the same sacred geometry principles. These are the patterns of growth in all of nature. So how can we employ them more fully? Well, we can explore sacred geometry through experiencing nature's wisdom. We can look at archetypal shapes and the numbers that create them. This is what makes the sacred real within ourselves and the structures in which we live, work, and worship. So this is exemplified in both ancient and modern examples of architecture and design, and can also be seen in all natural biology, in humans, plants, and animals. As in all ancient design methodologies, every natural pattern of growth or movement in the universe conforms to one or more of these simple geometric archetypes and mathematical truths. They're all based on reoccurring geometric patterns and math relationships. They're the building blocks of all creation. So I want to bring your attention to the cover art on the slide here. Put this one on your reading list, the credit, cover, and reference. This one is called The Power of Limits by Georgie Dosey by Shambhala Publications. And it's a beautiful book that goes into much more depth in this regard. So according to the ancients, the numbers from 1 to 10 and the shapes that represent them express this very comprehensive pattern language. So these 10 numbers complete the archetypal source book, if you will, of the original 10 design principles seen throughout the universe. That's why we call them the building blocks of nature. So by learning to identify these shapes and patterns, and by understanding the principles, it allows us to better understand nature. It allows us to help find more awareness and harmony, both within and without in our spaces. Another great reference book here for your reading list is called Numbers, the Universal Language by Dennis Googe, by Harry Abrams Publishers. So that's one that you can pick up as well to learn more. So we start the journey with 1. It's the monad. It's the point within the circle. This is an archetypal sacred geometry that births all the other much more complex geometries. The circle represents the womb and the cradle of our symbolic universe. So no matter how many times it is multiplied by itself, the result is the same. 1 by 1 by 1 by 1 equals 1. So you can practice at a later date drawing and experiencing oneness by concentrating on the center point as your own center of gravity as you use a compass and create a circle. Also in Feng Shui, the circle represents the element of metal. And this metal contains the most concentrated energy of all the elemental shapes. So let's start with the example of the first geometry that has birthed all the others. The point within the circle symbolizes 1. And if you read about creation myths from indigenous peoples, the point within the circle is the spark of creation itself that radiates expansive energy infinitely in all directions. The idea of 0 was an Indian concept that came about in the Age of Reason and negates the beginning or the unity of 1. So 0 is not really a number, it's a placeholder. And you can see in these examples, these symbols were also the Egyptian, the Chinese, and the Mayan glyphs symbolizing light. So the archetypal principles, 1 is the center point. Equal expansion in all directions from the divine center expresses unity and the divine order of the universe. The circumference, the second principle, is the wheel of motion. The circle represents nature's universal cycles, the orbits, the vibrations, the rhythms, the seasons. All cycles rise and fall with the yin and the yang. So when I'm feeling around space, I feel the expansion where the energy circulates endlessly around the perimeter, only to be referred back to the center, to that very point of stillness. So the deepest human awareness, the ability to be conscious, resonates with this geometry and is therefore considered a universal simple symbol of divine expression. So the number 1, the center, the circle, and the whole. So have you ever noticed that everything an indigenous native does is in a circle? And that is because the power of the world always works in circles and everything tries to be round. That's a quote spoken by the old Sioux medicine man in Black Elk Speaks. Another interesting principle is the radius forming the area maximizes efficiency. So when we look at a circular structure, the circle encloses the most space and provides the maximum enclosure, utilizing the least amount of resources. That includes materials and energy. And therefore, this shape provides the most sustainable energy profile. So almost everything in ancient civilization has considered the circle to be a symbol of the infinite or the perfect. It has no vertex, no beginning, no end. The circle is also related to the sun, the source of life, as well as to many deities. We see it in the Nepalese stupas. We see it as a symbol of the round table of the Knights of the Templar in the upper right image. Down below that, we see it in the ceiling of the Alhambra, and just as much in the native ice igloo. So notice how the energy moves in a circle and how you feel in that type of a space. Next time you're in a circular space, how do you feel differently there than you would, say, in a square space? For me, the energy always references back to the center, and therefore I find it very suitable for meditation. It's also the perfect shape for ceremony, for yoga, meditation, and it's very energy efficient. As in this beautiful Tibetan yurt that we see here on the screen. In history, round churches have a long and popular history. The circular plan enhances worship, religious, meditative, and yogic activity, where the purpose is to center oneself. It also supports the endless energy and the connection to the divinity. So that's why early churches and early indigenous structures, all of them referenced circles. Also in the bottom right, you can see the rose window of the Chartres Cathedral in France, further supporting that divinity. Now in modern architecture, we can find beautiful expression of the circle in the Guggenheim Museum in New York City. Looking to upgrade the museum space, the Guggenheim sought out the famous American architect Frank Lloyd Wright, I'm sure you've all heard of him, to create a modern building worthy of his ever-growing collection. The project was commissioned in 1943, but due to wartime and delays, the museum didn't open to the public until 1959. So Frank Lloyd Wright's design features a spiral ramp with offset galleries, a large interior atrium with skylights, and an almost blinding white color scheme, all in concrete. So alas, we go to 2. Mathematically speaking, this simple shape is the starting place of very complex geometry. If we draw 2 circles and we connect the center point of each of those circles, we create a line. This intersection touches the center of each other, and thereby we create 2ness. Now this is the birth portal. It's also very much like the mitosis of a cell into sister cells, as you see in the bottom middle image. Now, some Greek philosophers 5 centuries before Christ found this to be a problem. The birth of 2ness meant otherness. So their worldview was shattered by this break from unity into separation. So we now have polarity. Just as in magnets, the polar opposites of the inner world and the outer world, this dangerous illusion of separateness from nature creates an environmental crisis and a soul separation. So we have the metaphysical and the physical, 2 states of parallel realities in existence. The physicist Nassim Haramein explains it this way: the physical and the spiritual are interpenetrated, one within the other, They are two realities, the spiritual and the physical, that pour into and out of each other like an hourglass. There's a constant fluid-like exchange of the two, as you see in this image in the upper left. This line between them creates both a boundary and a link that attracts and binds together. Thus, polarity is seen as the twin, the polar tension between yin and yang, between me and you, between day and night. So on the left, we have a 3D shape called the torus. And again, Nassim Harim describes this as the keystone of the entire structure of the spiritual and physical universe. This is a rhythmic, balanced interchange between polar opposites and the powers of all creation, somewhat akin to breathing and the beating of our hearts. This is called the space in between, where we balance this consciousness, is called the Vessica Piscis. And this is the birth portal. It's the intersection between the one and the two. Through the portal of the Vesica Piscis emerge all the other universal proportions and shapes, as we will see. The union of the points in line through the two intersecting circles that create the Vesica Piscis contain all the necessary geometries and proportions to generate the numbers, shapes, and patterns found in nature, including the triangle, the square, and the pentagon. So the principle of two is seen in ancient architecture, particularly in doorways and arches or domes, particularly of places of worship. This signifies the portal between the mundane and the sacred worlds. So you enter through that doorway and you're entering into a new world. Often the floor plans of temples will reflect this intersection of circles. It's seen as the portal between heaven and earth. And because the Vesica Piscis symbol shows up so often in nature and human history, there are many meanings associated with it. It's considered very, very sacred in many, many cultures. On a spiritual level, it represents creation, birth, and the joining of the spiritual and the physical. In the beginning was the void, a single point of consciousness. Then the one looks into the mirror and sees its reflection, falls in love and sees itself. This reflection and the one were drawn together and joined and made love. So this joining of the sun, the universal consciousness, and the moon, the reflected experiential consciousness, join together and create the three. The space in between is the balance consciousness. So as you can see in this diagram, and all of these many, many shapes and geometries from this, Vesica Piscis is the mother of all forms, and all the other proportions and shapes come forth and are created from this shape. So we see a lot of this in early Christian architecture. The Christian religious was most likely responsible for its spread. It's also where the fish symbol comes from. And then as an architectural niche surrounding sculptures and the drawings of Christ. And finally, as the Gothic pointed arch. And then later, it became the four-sided arch. The Vesica Piscis in Christianity probably moved from paintings like the painting in the upper left to the sculpture in the porch of the Cathedral of Toledo, and then into the right-hand upper image, the cloister of the monastery in Santa Maria. So once developed into the four-sided vault, multiple variations in design and size were developed really during the Gothic period style of architecture. We can also see it in modern architecture. The very iconic Sydney Opera House by Horn-Utzon. Here, all of the spherical sections have uniform curvature in all directions, so they can be extracted from a single sphere. Each section of the sphere faces another of the same size, creating a cross-section of a Vessica Piscis from floor to ceiling. Therefore, every shell has an identical geometric structural behavior, even if they were designed in different heights to satisfy the different requirements for the performance. The architect here, of course, is Arup, and this was built in 1969. So playing around with this nexus of the sun and moon, I did a design concept for a yoga studio designed around a pair of ancient trees. And here I employed the Vesica Pisces in a yoga studio, specifically to symbolize the nexus of the sun and the moon, and to bring the sacred dance of the masculine and the feminine together and to promote healing. So constructing 3. Now, not only does the triangle state relationship and balance, it's the preeminent symbol of divinity. Its trinity derives from tri-unity, or 3 in 1. The Hindu religion, for example, names its trinity of gods: Brahma, the creator; Vishnu, the preserver; Shiva, the destroyer. And the primary archetypal principle of the 3 is the union of opposites, transformed by a third median element to create a new whole. Thereby, the symbolic message for 3 is wholeness, strength, stability, science and religion, relationship, and balance. The triangle also encloses the smallest amount of area within the largest perimeter and surface, so it is not the most economical in terms of materials and energy. So where do we see the Trinity in nature? Gosh, we see it everywhere. We see triple structures in butterflies, flowers, cucumber slices, honeydew melons, green peppers, and flies. The triple structures, including arches, are fundamental to architecture. So here we see in the 3-part harmony, the human form coming together to create self-sufficient, superior structures that embody strength, efficiency, balance, and visual appeal. In this slide, you see the structural ramifications. Triangles in architecture are the strongest shape. When triangles are used in the design of buildings and other structures, they provide great strength and stability. When building materials are used to form the triangle, the design has a heavy base, and the pinnacle on the top is capable of handling the weight because of how the energy is distributed down through the triangle. So this explains why many residential homes have A-frames or A-frame roofs. It's a sturdy structure. And the most sturdiest of these triangles are equilateral and isosceles. I love this quote from the ancient Hindu: "An arch never sleeps. It's always working." So we see the equilateral triangle in Giza, Egypt. It's by far the most common triangle in architecture. It features 3 congruent sides and angles. They measure 60 degrees on each corner. The lengths of the sides will vary, but each of the 4 triangular sides that form the pyramids are equilateral triangles. So this is very commonly in the pyramids. In this case, we're looking at the pyramid complex of Giza in Egypt. And they have been used for strength in building structures for over 4,000, many more years than that, actually. We also see triangular structures in the number 3 in indigenous architecture. On the left, you see an Indonesian Batak Toba house. And this traditional dwelling is raised on wooden piles. They're connected to the beams with mortise joints, which are far more resistant to the earthquakes that they experience than with joining nails. The piles rest on stones, which protect them from moisture. These houses are mostly made of bamboo and wood with thatched roofs. And interestingly enough, their thatched roof has a tension roof structure with outward leaning gables that hold the ridge beam in place. And the rafters lean against the ridge beam and are supported by the bottom wall plate. That creates a column-free interior space. And on the right, of course, pyramid technology and triangular structures were used in the Mayan pyramids. This is El Castello in Chichen Itza in Yucatan, Mexico. So now we scratch our heads. We get into math. Well, not really. We're not going to do that here. But just to express what is the Pythagorean theorem, this relates to the 3 sides of a right triangle, where the sum of the areas of the 2 squares of the legs A and B equals the area of the square on the hypotenuse. So where do we see that in nature? We see it a lot. You'll find it used in these flowers here, the dearborn cedar, a garlic, a day leaf of a globe flower. You see it in a lot of natural leaf patterns. And this is a perfect example of the Pythagorean triangle. So moving on, I've used this in my work as well. This project is called The Embrace. It's located in Woodstock, and it's a study of triangles, incorporating both equilateral triangles that form the geodesic dome in the background, which was the existing structure, with an isosceles triangular addition that juts out from the geodesic dome. So this residence, called the Embrace, the dual residence, was fashioned after Frank Lloyd Wright, embracing Buckminster Fuller. The geodesic dome of the original structure is a typical Bucky Fuller structure. And so I chose the fractal, a self-replicating symmetry of that geodesic dome for the addition, where the whole relates to the geometry of its parts. So the 2 triangular elements meet at the dramatic entrance on the bottom left. It forms a bridge between the 2 distinct building forms, and it forms a protective entry where those 2 triangles come together. Now we construct 4. 4, as you know, is the square. So from the Vesica Pisces, we draw another circle and connect the lines to form the square, otherwise known as the tetrad. We've now journeyed from the point, the line, and the surface, and we now birth volume for the first time. So 4 is the first number and shape of the 3-dimensional space. From the point to the line to the surface, now we have the volume. The 4 expresses the first 3D shape. Widely used in architecture, these geometric forms are widespread expressions of 4 as microscopic structures of atoms, molecules, crystals, viruses, and living cells. There are 3 shapes. There's the tetragon, which is a flat square, a tetrahedron, which has 4 identical triangular faces, and it's a 3-dimensional rendition of the square. And there's the cube, which has 6 identical square faces. So the number 4 also speaks to the 4 elements of earth: air, fire, and water. It speaks to the 4 seasons, the 4 points of the compass, the 4 phases of the moon. And because 4 is generally a very practical material number, few superstitions are associated with it symbolically. It's a very, very grounded shape. And here we see it in antiquity. We see it in the 4 directions as Hopi symbols for Mother Earth. We see it in the Chartres Cathedral labyrinth, and we see it in Italian Renaissance garden paths. These square labyrinths and those that were built around squares and crosses are metaphors for our wanderings throughout Earth, within ourself and on our path of transcendence. So cities and temples are often believed to represent heaven on earth. The Hindu mandala shown here is a structure that represents the structure of the universe. The ancients believed that the sky was perfection, and their goal was to reproduce perfection on earth. The mandala underlies the ground plan of temples in Hindu, Jain, and Buddhist worlds. It combines the circle, representing the celestial heavens, with the square, meaning the material world of earth. The sides are oriented to the cardinal directions, and the dot at the center represents the cosmic mountain at the center of the universe. So the square is the fundamental form of Vedic Yantras, these mandalas that we spoke about, and express the rhythm of creation, expresses man's connection with high symbolic content, and contains many sacred geometries within the whole. The yantras are used as tools of visualization and meditation. But most notably, the square denotes the terrestrial world, where in Indian cosmology and in temple building, that earth must be transcended. So some examples in ancient architecture, we see 4 and the square and the Kaaba at the center of the Great Mosque of Mecca in Saudi Arabia. And here the Muslim pilgrims are surrounding the Kaaba and make their pilgrimage annually around this giant cube. In a more modern expression of the circle and the square, this is one that I did in San Francisco, the Museo Italia Americano, where the square was the foundational structure of the building. And then, of course, it had this huge gallery and open circular gallery to the top. So the circle and the square combines both the circle, the celestial heavens again, with the square, meaning the material world of Earth. Now we journey on to construct 5, which is the Pentagon. And here you can see, if you can go back and try this yourself when you have more time. We create the circles, we create the Vesica Pisces, we create the Pentagon within that Vesica Pisces, and thereby creating the 5 star. Now, where do we see the 5 star? Everywhere. If you look at nature, if you look at crystals, this structure is everywhere. This hexagonal symmetry with tetrahedral bonding angles is a huge expression in flower geometry And in other natural patterns, like in the sea cucumber, the radiolarian, starfish, the bat, the stingray, the cat, the tiger, these pentagons abound in the animal kingdom as well as the plant kingdom, and very much in humans. Fives are manifested in nature as beautiful and efficiently designed forms. And what do they symbolize? Humanity and health. To the Pythagoreans, the pentagon has 5 equal sides, 5 equal angles of 108 degrees with 72-degree angles, all very, very sacred geometry numbers. We see the sacred geometry of the human body honored throughout ancient cultural history through both classical architecture and dance. And I like to think of the sacred geometry as the human third skin. Here we have representations of the hand, of the human body, and the pentagon is associated with the human body shape. It symbolizes human perfection. The top angle is the head and the relationship with the divinity or the transcendent part. The following lateral angles represent the hands and the control over physical level and action. The 5, the Pentad, also speaks to the 5 senses, the 5 extensions from the torso, and each limb ending in 5 fingers or toes. It expresses the shape of the head and the shape of the Roman numeral for 5 as a V. So what does 5 really mean? It means regeneration. Pentagons perpetuate their own image endlessly. And this self-similar accord, where they repeat the same shape on different scales, is the basis of what we call fractal mathematics. And we'll find that the mathematics forms the Fibonacci sequence in nature. And these are the numbers below. So we see the 5 associated with this beautiful flower and the 5 pentagon overlaid on the mask of Hermes on the right. But most of all, we see the Fibonacci sequence in nature. The series of numbers grows from within itself, from its immediate past. It's using nothing from the outside for its growth. It appears everywhere in plants and music, in seashells, in spiral galaxies, in the human body, and everything associated with 5-ness in nature. Now, this sequence, or the pattern in which it regenerates, is called the mathematical Fibonacci sequence, where all the sequential numbers starting with 0 add up. So if you add 0 and 1, you get 1. If you add 1 and 2, you get 3. If you add 3 and 5, you get 8. 8 and 13, 21, and so on and so forth. So this is not by random chance, but because the stamens of a flower can be packed most efficiently when they are a Fibonacci number. The flower wastes less resources managing its petals and can grow more effectively when it uses this mathematical sequence. So here we see the symbolism of the Pentagon. We see the star, the 5-pointed star within, which, by the way, is a worldwide symbol of flags in over 60 countries. They all stand for something different, but they're all respected as a symbol of power and excellence. So this 5 has universal appeal to mankind and a deep, deep archetypal connection. From ancient times, the 5-sided star has been a magical symbol to ward off the devil in many cultures. And in architecture, both past and present, here we see many, many forts, but we're looking at Fort McHenry here. were built in a 5-star pattern. It was a very popular shape for early forts and fortresses. They first appeared around the time that gunpowder became commonly used in warfare. It's a star-shaped fort best known for its role in the War of 1812 in Baltimore Harbor in the Chesapeake Bay. Whereas the Pentagon on the right is one you all know. It's the Virginia headquarters of the U.S. Department of Defense, located in a massive 5-sided concrete and steel building. It's a potent symbol of America's military strength. And the Pentagon ranks among the largest office buildings in the world. More recently, I've been playing around with 5 in this concept design for a company called One Voice Boardroom and Wellness Center. They wanted a concept for a business center for marketing wellness products. And they wanted something that could grow over time. So the 5 was the perfect symbol to use for this. So here, the number 5 as the symbol of mankind, also as a symbol of wholeness, is used in this wellness center. And the amenities here include childcare, gym, yoga, massage, healing, juice bar and cafe, et cetera, et cetera. But here you can understand how the 5 regenerates. On the left, you can see that each individual pod of 5 workstations combined together can easily branch off and rejuvenate and create a larger system for expansion. And that's why the 5-element pods were used for a modular desk system that grows organically in pentangles to accommodate up to 100 telemarketing staff for their sales operation. Now on to 6. In constructing 6, again from the Vesica Pisces, we connect the lines of the intersections of the circles with the center line, and we create the hexagon. Now, the hexagon in nature symbolizes universal order, and we see it in ice crystals, we see it in snowflakes, and most often in beehive cells. The hexagonal ice crystal, or frozen water, this crystal structure is characterized by the oxygen atoms forming a hexagonal symmetry with near tetrahedral bonding angles. So it's their structural makeup at the atomic level that's also expressing the hexagon. Where else do we see it? We see it in nature. We see it in art. We see it in Islamic tiles, in hexagonal buildings, in the bagua. We see it in beehives, molecules, and crystals, and in this beautiful photographs of the ice crystals on the right. So it's very, very, very prevalent in nature, and also very, very prevalent in ancient architecture, because number 6 is the universal order and represents harmony and balance. So it's found throughout nature. It's in organized religions. They insist that it's the symbol of harmony and balance, although the esoteric meaning of the hexagon goes much deeper, right to the heart of our origins. All the geometric shapes in sacred geometry, the hexagon is arguably the most powerful and fascinating. It's found in many spiritual symbols, such as the Star of David, also known as the Seal of Solomon, and is believed to be one of the oldest symbols ever used. It's the sacred geometry formed by the interlocking of two triangles. The upward pointing triangle represents the positive male energy, and the downward facing triangle represents the negative or female energy. And here's an example of hexagrams, in the geodesic architecture at the Eden Project. This project is designed by Grimshaw Architects, where two biome buildings encapsulate a rainforest and a Mediterranean biome. And each consists of several domes joined together. And what does this symbolize? Inspiration. Their starting point was the geodesic system, which was, of course, made very famous by the American architect Buckminster Fuller, who designed the Montreal biosphere in Canada. So this geodesic concept provides for the least amount of weight and the maximum surface area on the curve with great strength. So it has its structural amazing qualities as well. So here we come to 7, the birth of the heptad. This is a virgin number because 7 can only be divisible by itself. It also pops out from the Vesica Piscis, and it is the most venerated number associated with magic, with mythology, with mysticism, with ceremony, and you might say superstition. We think of it, all of the 7s, the 7 wonders of the world, 7 days in a week, 7 colors of the rainbow, the 7-year itch, even Snow White and the 7 dwarfs, and Noah's Ark was even loaded by 7s. No wonder we have lucky numbers of 7s. And we see 7 in nature, more rarely actually. But if you look at mammals, most of them have 7 cervical vertebrae. If you look at the nitrogen molecule, it has 7 atomic molecules. If you look at the ladybug, it has 7 spots. So this 7-fold symmetry, even though it's not very abundant in nature, it's very inspiring to many and has inspired and relates to the harmony of color and light. So color, light, and sound share this 7-fold harmonic, all growth patterns. And here you see the 7 star and the 7 wavelengths of light corresponding with the musical notes. We see the classical 7 mostly in labyrinths. Now, if you're not familiar with labyrinths, their purpose is as an initiation activity. You enter, and you are to enter an altered state where the spirit journeys up through the spirit worlds, experiencing the after-death journey while still alive. The ancient 7-circuit labyrinth creates 7 concentric rings. In medieval times, the 7 circuits were seen to correspond to the 7 visible planets. So in their mind, the labyrinth was a cosmic journey through the heavens. We see it in our country, in Native America, the ancient serpent mound in Ohio. See a misspelling there. So here we see a different form of classical 7-circuit labyrinth, but it still has seven stages and 7 curves. This one is thought to be keyed up with the summer solstice, the equinox, and the winter solstice. This great serpent mound is a prehistoric effigy mound on the plateau along the Ohio Creek in Adams County, Ohio, built by the Adena indigenous people. And we've seen some examples of 7, not many, but this is an example of the 7 angels crop circle, which was reported in the UK in 2018. And here you see the 7 angels and the 7 stars, very cosmic number. I see very few buildings built with 7, but this is an interesting residence in Los Angeles that was built around a 7 plan. But now we go to 8. Constructing the octagon, again, coming from the Vesica Pisces, we construct the octagon, and this symbolizes periodic renewal, unity and expansion. The Earth Mother Goddess, it also speaks to justice, infinity, and it's divisible by 1, 2, 4, and 8. And as you know, it's also a great Asian symbol. It's the harmonic of 8 in the classic Chinese trigrams. The Bagua, the 8 trigrams used in the Chinese Taoist cosmology to represent the fundamental principles or energies of reality. The number 8 also symbolizes the eternal return, structure, strength, material efficiency, renewal, phases of the moon. It is associated with the moon, and here you see it in the Yantras that we spoke of earlier. Let me go back to that one. Unfortunately, I have to correct that slide. 2 images are on top. But you see it in these 8-point stars you see in Alhambra in Granada, Spain. There's 3 different chambers that have elaborate octagonal star ceilings. The Hall of Chambers has the Hall of the Kings, and in the Hall of the Ambassadors, all have this 8-star. And I played with this. It's really wonderful to play with this geometry. I played with it with the Ram Dass library, and it's the essential partie of that library in Rhinebeck. And when you put 2 squares together and you create this 8-sided star, it's called the Astakana. And the number 8 here is used to symbolize infinity. The Astakana shares 8 sides with the lotus flower, which was another symbol that I was working with. And that lotus flower, as you know, in the ancient Indian cosmology represents the unfolding energies of creation. So the square donating the earthly world must be transcended. Here you see the floor plans on the right, how the 2 squares are superimposed. You see the site plan and a model on the left. Beautiful, beautiful geometry to work with. So now we enter the 9, and we're going to take a break once we get through 10. So just bear with me. Constructing the 9. What does 9 mean? That's the ultimate extension. It's the number of completion. It's the end of a cycle. There's 9 months in the birth process. It's the end of the birthing process and the end of the birth and development of the numbers and the geometries in nature. So here we see all the 9s. And it forms a 9-sided building or shape is called a nonagon. This 9-sided nonagon symbolizes perfection. It symbolizes balance, order. It's the most sacred number. It's significant in birth and rebirth. It's the culmination of consciousness. 9 also symbolizes patience, meditation, spiritual enlightenment, and awakening. The ancient builders incorporated 9 into many of their smaller stone circles. They incorporated 9 into the temples of health and enlightenment. So here you can see the number 9 used in both the Enneagram in the bottom left. The 9-point nonagram was the basis of Gurdjieff's Enneagram. It also relates to So Fa, So La, Si, Do. And in the top right, it represents the magic square, the Lo Shu square in Feng Shui. The number 9 is the final number having a specific identity, whereas the Ennead, the 9 represents the boundary between the mundane and the infinite ultimate journey. Beyond 9 is a new journey, or the ultimate expression of birth. We see 9 in nature, but rarely. Here's a plant with a 9, and sometimes we see it in the crop circles. We do see it in architecture. We see it in the 9-storied temples of the Mayans, very symbolic, and we see it in the 9-tiered pagodas. Here, this one is the Chinese pagoda, a Taoist temple, the precious stone fortress. So we see many. The Maya believed that the underworld had 9 different levels. So they represented this idea in their gigantic stone pyramids as they built the tombs for their kings, which often have 9 tiers. And we also see it in this beautiful Taoist temple. Also in modern architecture, here's a compilation of examples where we see 9. We see it mostly in modern architecture in the 9 star-shaped Nanagan Baha'i temples. That is the most startling example in modern architecture. Which brings us to the end of our 1 to 10 journey, the number 10, also called the Decadon, excuse me. This represents the 10 spiritual graces, the 10 Sufi Vedas, and the Decad in the Kabbalah. Number 10 is also known as a symbol of the authority of God and his government on earth. This number can also symbolize responsibility, law, completeness. Number 10 is considered to be the symbol of obedience and the responsibility of people towards God's law. They're symbols of power and strength. Here you see it in the tree of life. The symbolism here, meaning the recapitulation of the whole, the immortality and rebirth. It speaks of new beginnings, the world heaven, and the tree of life. So the tree of life itself is a symbol for rebirth. As trees lose their leaves, they seem to be dead during winter, but then new buds appear and fresh new leaves unfurl during the spring. So this represents the beginning of a new life and a fresh start. The tree represents a series of divine emanations of God's creation. Excuse me. The tree of life diagram is used in many mystical traditions. It usually consists of 10 nodes, each symbolizing different archetypes, and it has 22 lines connecting the 10 nodes, often arranged in 3 columns to represent that they belong to a common category. You find this in the Jewish Kabbalah, referred to as the symbol as the 10 Sephirot. But it's also in non-Jewish and Hermetic Kabbalah. So it's generally considered a universal Kabbalistic tree of life. I found very, very few examples of 10-sided decadonal buildings, but here we have a few. We have the Gonbad-e Kabas in Iran, and what is it for? It marks the grave. It's a cylindrical tomb tower with 10 sides. So it's used for tombs. This one happens to be a UNESCO World Heritage Site. The one in the middle is also a mausoleum. This is the mausoleum of Kara Kohunla in Armenia. This is from 1413, and it also has a decadonal 10-sided plan. And then in the US, as a more recent one, the only one I found was just a crazy looking barn in West Virginia called the Ralph Snyder Barn. So you see very, very few. This was built in 1890, and you see very few 10-sided barns today. Well, that completes our 1 to 10. I think we should take a short 5-minute bio break. now that we've completed the first 10 numbers and shapes. And when we come back, I will introduce the spiral geometries of nature, the golden mean, and the flower of life, and the story of creation, and the story of the holistic health community sanctuary.
Wonderful, Janice. Thank you so much. So we'll see you all at 8:12. 8:12. Thank you. Okay, it looks like we're ready to resume. Janice, you can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Okay, great. So in the next time remaining, now that you have the fundamental understanding of the first 10 numbers in nature, I'll take you for a whirlwind tour of beautiful imagery. So we're going to look at the flower of life and the golden rectangle spirals that we find in nature. And in this relationship, it's called a golden rectangle or a golden ratio. And if we create this properly, we find the sacred spiral within it. This phi, as we call it, is the golden mean proportion of 1.618. And this is a very unique mathematical relationship where the length of the whole line is to the large part in the same ratio that the large part is to the small part, creating harmonic proportions. So the golden mean or the golden ratio is the only way to divide a line so that the whole and the parts simultaneously relate to each other in the same way. And it equals 1.618. It's represented here by the Greek letter phi or phi. The ratios of the sequential Fibonacci numbers 2, 1, 3, 2, 5, 3, etc. approach the golden ratio. So in fact, the higher the Fibonacci numbers go, the closer their relationship comes to the golden number. The spiral is one of the oldest, powerful, and spiritual symbols connecting us to Earth, nature, galaxy, and our life force. It represents the God and the goddess, the life energy, and our evolving journey. We see it everywhere in nature, so it's no surprise that the origin of geometry springs forth from the laws of the physical nature of the universe and is embedded in the environment all around us. It's so consistent and mind-blowing that it happens at every scale. So this golden ratio, the golden number, since ancient times has been used to achieve harmony and balance in everything from geometry to architecture, from painting to music, and to the nature of all creation. And you even see in the upper right-hand corner that the relationship of the Earth to Moon shares this golden number and golden relationship. We see many, many spiral buildings in the modern world. And one in particular where I'm going to show you how the spiral is very efficient in packing. Its geometry is so efficient in packing that I like to use it for land planning. Here it's used in the Mandala campus plan. This is a school situation. And also from the center flows out to each of the buildings. So it's the shortest amount of distance between the student buildings and the center where they meet, and also used it as a tributary for collecting water. Here's a shot of what the school buildings look like. See, they're all based on the golden rectangle as well. A combination of the golden rectangle gives it a very harmonic vibration. And in the middle of the campus is a dodecahedron, a 12-sided building. This was envisioned to be a central amphitheater, and it was envisioned to be the spiritual center. You see how it was created from the dodecahedron geometry, and the water flows into and is stored here for the campus in a desert environment. Another project in a desert environment where water is very key was a master plan my team and I did for a fly ranch competition in the Black Rock Desert. Here again, we used the spiral plan as an efficient community layout and for resource sharing. And then the central water collection and solar collection shade structure was a series of 7 in a spiral. that's spiraled up. So here we're looking not only at nature's geometry, but we're looking at how nature functions, which is really the definition of biomimicry. So we get a lot of bio-inspiration from a number of local flora and fauna. This is designed around a shell structure, very, very efficient spiral shell structure. And you see here the floor plan is in this structure of the golden rectangle and the golden spiral. A couple of shots of the interiors. So on to the flower of life geometry. This symbolizes creation, unity, and infinite possibilities. You see here that it's the same function as from single cell diatoms, creating the same language of nature as our geometry. The flower of life symbolizes creation, reminds us of the unity in everything. We're all built from the same blueprint. Series of overlapping circles that can build infinitely outward, forming a flower-like grid similar to the single cell diatoms that you see forming the blueprint of life. And this is the birth of creation and infinite possibilities. So the story of life in geometry terms is the generation of the tree of life from the circle of life, as you see here. And this, again, births the sources, the platonic solids. So the circle of life is the source. The creation of life is birth through the Vesica Piscis. The seed of life represents the 7 days of creation. The egg of life, the 8 original cells. The fruit of life, the 13 circle grid or Metatron's cube that generates the 5 platonic solids, and the flower of life, the blueprint of creation, and then the tree of life, the symbol for rebirth. So here we see it in antiquity in all of these unknown places from Scotland to Greece and many, many other sacred places all over the world. We see the flower of life. We also see building precedents of the flower of life in modern architecture. So just as a note of the story of creation, I want to do a shout out for and credit one of my favorite sacred geometry teachers. And this is his image on the right. He does a lot of fabulous classes if you'd like to learn more online. So you can get together with him at jane108academy.com. And as we tell the story of the geometric creation of life, I'm going to tell you the story of how our holistic health center sanctuary design is created. So here we're using all of the various things that we've talked about. We're using the petal shape, which is formed from the golden spiral and the golden square. We're using the relationship of the petals in that golden mean relationship. We're using a 9-star structure and 5-fold triangles to represent the highest attainment of perfection. As we see here on the bottom right, drawing that. So we're incorporating the flower of life in the floor patterns. We're incorporating the seed of life in the curtains that will come down and encapsulate the treatment spaces, and a glass dome with a dodecahedron or icosahedron. So here you see a pair of calipers, and these calipers have been used since early architecture to make sure that you are getting that phi proportion. So these are proportioned so that you're in the perfect golden rectile phi 1.618 proportion. So all the features of the floor plan are in perfect proportion. We also use the 9 star, and you see here in the development of the floor plans here, we see the 9 star and the 9 petal formations. Can you trace that in the plan here? These are beams that will hold up the 2nd floor. And moving on, here's an image of those calipers using the same golden mean and Fibonacci proportions in the elevations. And finally, little eye candy here, I'll show you the development of the 3D model and the renderings. So here you can see it in an imaginary site. The 9 petals, the 9 star, the tree of life, all of these things coming together. Here's the entry, another view, the entry on the upper level. And as you enter into the lobby, there's an apothecary. You look through the apothecary to the lobby area here. And directly behind that is this beautiful spiral stair that takes that energy then and whisks it and brings it upstairs. The major space, of course, is the interior sanctuary. It's a multidisciplinary round space that you see on the right here. Here it's set up as if you were to have tables and seating for a dining arrangement. And it's also a theater. It's a multiple use space. And these curtains then are theater riggings that come down. So on the evenings that we use it for massage therapy and the free holistic health healings, these come down and you have your tables, your massage tables underneath. And just to cap it off, if you were a fly in the ceiling, this is what you would see. You would be looking down through the icosahedron, down into the floor area of the flower, the geometry of the flower of life on the floor pattern. And looking through this, you can see a layering upon layer of sacred geometry and meaning, all designed to enhance the transformation of healing. Looking down through the icosahedron, through the seed of life draperies to the flower of life floor pattern in the sanctuary. So with that, I'd like to summarize just by inviting you to go outside and start experiencing nature or even buildings through a new lens. Now that you have a new appreciation of number and shape and geometry and how that shapes everything in our universe, I invite you to go outside and experience sacred geometry in nature for yourself and discover its pervasive beauty. So many, many credits and references. These are some, if you want to pursue this study for yourself, these are many of the references I use. And one of my favorites is at the bottom, and this would be great with kids. Michael Schneider's Beginner's Guide to Constructing the Universe is a great book to have, and you can play around and draw all the sacred geometries. Kids and adults can have a lot of fun with that. All you need to do is have a compass and a ruler and some pencils. So I want to thank you for your time tonight. And this is who I am and how you can contact me. This is how I can be reached. All of my design work, I try to apply both the practical architectural design practices with the sacred. And that is sort of where we will leave it tonight. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Janus. Thank you. What a stunning presentation. Yeah, so we are at 8:30. Janice, what's your time frame like? Are you available for a couple of questions or?
Sure, if people want to stay on and have questions, I'm absolutely available.
Okay, great. So perhaps you can stop screen share
Okay.
and we can move to gallery mode. And great. Wonderful. So if you look at the chat, Janice, just for a moment, you'll see amazing, well done, incredible presentation, beautiful. So lots of wonderful gratitude for this just stunning presentation. If you have a question for Janet, there's two ways we can do this. You can click on the reactions button at the bottom of your screen and you'll see the option to raise hand. Or for some of you, it might be under the participants icon, depending on whether or not you've updated your Zoom. So those are the two places where you can find the digital raise your hand. And if that's too challenging, you can chat in the box, I have a question. And so, yeah, and then I can unmute you.
So are you going to give me the questions?
Well, let's, okay, we have Heidi Rome. All right, Heidi, I'm gonna invite you to unmute. Go ahead, there you go, great.
Thank
Hi,
you.
Heidi.
Hi. Thank you so much, Janice. No, first of all, thank you. It was amazing. I couldn't write fast enough, and it was fantastic. A lot for me to follow up on. Question: have you worked on any, whether architecture or some other design for autism communities? I'm wondering about the impact of the beautiful energy that you've created in the environment that looks very soothing. And I was wondering if you've ever applied it to autism or other special needs.
Yeah, not necessarily, but it's perfect for that. I haven't had a client with that program, but definitely you can use shape, color, sound, all of those things, all of the architectural, spatial devices that we have to create an absolutely best environment for clients like that. Absolutely.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Heidi. Anyone else want to jump in with a question as we're near the end of our time together, but we have room for a couple of questions. So what's wonderful is that this presentation in the very near future will be available on the HHC website. And Janice has just done an incredible job of researching and crediting. It's just been an unbelievable effort to bring this just beautiful, comprehensive presentation to you this evening. So we have here, I don't have a video or mic, but I think this would be fabulous for the new infrastructure and Biden's eco-green New Deal plan. It would be great to implement on a large scale. Okay, is this building actually scheduled to be built and where? So I think that's a question probably for the HHC.
Yeah.
Yeah, so does someone from the HHC want to speak to that? Is this building? Yeah, go ahead, Cornelia. Just speak up, Pentad.
It is our intention to build this building on a campus with other buildings and with some farmland for regenerative farming and possibly an intentional community. So we're looking into all of that, and we've just begun the fundraising for the first phase of that plan. So do join our mailing list, and we would love for you to be aware of that as we make progress.
Okay, so everyone, have a beautiful and blessed evening. Thank you so much, Janice. Thank you so much, HHC, for putting on these excellent free community programs. It is such a blessing. Have a lovely evening, everybody. And Janice and Cornelia, if you want to stay on for a moment, let's stop recording now.